Everybody knows about Georgia, right? Well, the hopes of the Democratic Party and the hopes of a lot of people in Georgia were that Stacey Abrams would have become the first black woman elected governor in the United States. Didn't happen because Brian Kemp won. But Stacey Abrams, along this process, has stated that there was voter suppression in Georgia that thwarted her ability to win that race.
I cannot concede that. But my assessment is the law currently allows no further viable remedy.
Stacey Abrams became a star for the Democratic Party amid her historic run to become governor of Georgia. She ended her campaign on Friday on a pointed note, is now pledging to continue litigation to reform the state's voting procedures. Joining me now is Stacey Abrams, 2018 Democratic gubernatorial candidate from Georgia. Tell me a little bit about how you came to the conclusion to make that speech with that language and not concede.
So we spent a great deal of time thinking through what the legal remedies could be, in part because we'd already filed 4 successful lawsuits in the 10-day period between Election Day and that Friday. 4 successful opportunities to prove that the elections had been mismanaged. And as I thought through what would be next, we were considering a contest, essentially saying that once the election was certified, we would challenge the veracity of that decision. But looking at the law, looking at our claim, I realized that it wouldn't be appropriate to fight in that way because then it becomes about me. And there was a larger conversation to be had, which was about the erosion of democracy in Georgia. The machinery had broken. People were being denied access to the right to vote across the state, across parties, across region, and that was wrong.
Yes, Stacey Abrams has some valid points here about Georgia elections. I think those same valid points could be made about many states across the country, many districts across the country where people were pushed off voting rolls. But I also believe it should be stated about not only the general elections, but also about primaries. Primaries in both parties. But I know for a fact in the Democratic Party that we had irregularities, antiquated equipment, no way to track it. Hell, we talked about Florida, we talked about Nevada, we talked about Arizona, we talked about New York. I'm leaving out so many places. I don't want to piss nobody off because I know there are a lot of you who experienced it, who saw it, who know it. Does it make any sense that Brian Kemp, who's now the governor of Georgia, does it make any sense that he was Secretary of State, was able to oversee the election process while he was running for governor? Does that make sense to you?
Governor-elect, soon-to-be former Secretary of State for Georgia, Brian Kemp. Governor, you won by 55,000 votes, but clearly Stacey Abrams is not accepting it. Basically, it seems like she's saying you cheated by canceling 1.4 million people off voter rolls since 2011. What's your reaction?
Well, you know, look, Brian, I'm moving on. I'm the governor-elect. The election's been certified. This is indeed over, and I'm looking forward to serving hard-working Georgians, and that includes all of them, by the way.
Does it make any sense that Brian Kemp, who's now the governor of Georgia, does it make any sense that he was Secretary of State, was able to oversee the election process while he was running for governor? Does that make sense to you? Let's say you're a Cowboys fan, and let's say the Redskins get to make the final calls in the Super Bowl that you're both playing in. Would you be okay with that? See, I know you wouldn't be okay with it because you're not stupid. You'd say that doesn't make sense. And I'd say, well, hey, you don't know if we're cheating. You'll say, it looks like you could be cheating. How are we going to trust you? And that's all that, well, that to me is enough to say it makes no damn sense for Brian Kemp, Secretary of State, and he's running for governor. He should not have any at all influence. And don't tell me he stopped being Secretary of State a week before the election. Come on, man. Come on, buddy. If he knew he was going to run, he should have stopped 2 years ago, a year ago. It's got to be something, some type of rule.
Technically, Brian Kemp didn't step down from Secretary of State until after he'd won the governorship.
Tuesday, as you know, we earned a clear and convincing victory at the ballot box, and today we're beginning the transition process. That's why, effective 11:59 a.m. today, I'm stepping down as Secretary of State.
Yeah, make that make sense. But you know, Stacey Abrams did actually have a lot of firepower. I mean, there was Oprah.
Has an ancestor who didn't have the right to vote, and you are choosing not to vote wherever you are in this state.
And there was
country.
this
You
guy.
are dishonoring your family.
And give it up for your next governor, Stacey Abrams. I am excited to be here. So I love Georgia. But I'm here for one simple reason. I'm here to ask you to vote.
Because this is bigger than a political fight. It is about our lives and our future. And that is why we must proclaim in one clear voice that we are Georgia.
See, Stacey Abrams did a remarkable job of bringing out new voters. Remarkable. The only problem is the negative Trump shit that they were running constantly on MSNBC and CNN. Well, it kept Trump supporters engaged. Yeah, typically the president, who's ever in the office, their supporters go to sleep. That's because typically people stop talking about him. Yeah, the negative Trump focus really brought out the Trump voters. Yeah, every day they weren't talking about Obama. So back in 2012, Obama supporters went to sleep. They went night-night. See, that didn't happen with Trump supporters. Trump supporters stayed awake because every day CNN and MSNBC are making Trump front page news because it's good for business. That had an adverse effect on Stacey Abrams. And here goes the numbers to back it up. In the previous gubernatorial election, Republican Nathan Deal won with 1.3 million votes. Stacey Abrams lost and she had 1.9 million votes. Get it? 600,000 more votes than the winner of the previous governor race. 55% of Georgians voted. That is historical. Hasn't been even close to being matched since 1982. Now, I know it may be easy for you to dismiss what I'm saying. You know, you may say, well, Donald Trump deserved criticism. And some of these stories that are negative, well, that's what he earned, negative coverage. But just like this sign here that I'll try to cover up, it's not about if the stories are deservedly negative, it's about what the impact is on the public. Recently, the Pew Research Center in Washington, D.C. did a study. They compared Donald Trump, Obama, and Bush, and Clinton, and said, what kind of stories were written about them in their first 60 days as president? Only 5% of stories were positive about Donald Trump. Compare that to 42% for Obama. Also, a whopping 62% of Trump stories were negative. Compare that to 20% for Obama, 28% for Bush, 28% for Clinton. And it's not just about if the coverage is positive or negative, it's also about the vantage point of the coverage. Donald Trump, typically the coverage is about his personality, not about his policy. 69% of stories about Trump are about his personality. Compare that to Obama, where it was 50%, and Bush 35%, and Clinton 42%. Don't get me wrong, we all know Donald Trump is a different type of president, unorthodox in the way he uses Twitter, but still this has an impact on what people think, and an impact on what his supporters think. So my idea is that this type of coverage, this negative onslaught, gives Donald Trump the victim, designation. And when people see you as a victim, then they're more likely to come out and support you, as opposed to people who think that you're winning. Brian Kemp did not defeat Stacey Abrams because of voter suppression, though that may have helped. The real reason why is because Donald Trump's name has been run through the mud so much that his followers, his supporters, people who voted for him, they're still engaged and they're active. I wrote an article to go along with this video. Stacey Abrams lost Georgia, but you won't believe who's really to blame. Contact me at tim@timblacktv.com. Follow me at RealTimBlack.
The way I see it, Stacey Abrams, she handled her business. But so did corporate media.